Roll call.
Commissioner Parker,
Here.
Commissioner Wolf,
Here.
Commissioner Nemeth,
Here.
Commissioner Chandler,
Here.
and Commissioner Young is not here.
Great. Okay, so we'll move on to the approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Okay, so we're ready for the first public commentary on agenda items, limited to 3 minutes per speaker. Anyone here to speak on agenda-related items? Please approach the podium if so. Looks like nope.
All right.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. Minutes from January 16th, last month. If ever, oh, here's Lisa.
Yay.
Hi, Lisa. If everyone had a chance to review the minutes, any amendments or edits to the minutes from last meeting? If not, we'll need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Moving along. That's great.
Yeah, we're already halfway through the
I know,
agenda.
we're-
Lisa.
Good job, guys.
Okay, so we'll move on to presentations. Stephanie, you want to talk a little bit about the side panels presentation?
Absolutely. So I would like to introduce Hillary Hansel and Keith Kohler. So Hillary is a planner with our Parks Department, and Keith is an architect that have been, the two of them have been working to put together this design for us ever since PMAC gave us the task of going back and trying to come up with some alternative proposals to the building after the building was over budget. We felt like we wanted to explore other possibilities that were more affordable and maybe answered some of the same problems. So I'm going to let Hillary and Keith take it away, and they're going to show you what we've come up with and also kind of remind us a little bit about how we got to this point. And then we can discuss. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone. So purpose of us coming to you guys today, kind of twofold.
Can you talk into the mic too?
Oh,
Because
oops,
otherwise
sorry.
it doesn't pick up on it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You guys hear me now? So the purpose really today is to kind of provide you an informational update of what we've been looking at. We felt like we got to a point where we wanted to share and get your feedback and input. But just to kind of reiterate, this is a feasibility study, so this is just kind of looking at high concept level of like what might this look like, what might the cost look like, and is this something we want to proceed with developing further. So that's kind of where we are right now. And kind of the purpose and goals that we heard for looking at this study was really to improve the comfort for both the vendors and market customers during inclement weather, so especially during the winter months to help improve that, but also maybe through things like rain and other sorts of things year-round. And then again, just looking at this roll-down side panels as a financially feasible option that we could do in the near term, knowing there were some limitations with the building. So just to kind of look back at the project background and kind of where we were before. As you recall, the new building that was proposed was a project budget of $875,000. And when we put out to bid originally in the fall of 2016, it came back with the lowest bid at $1.4 million, which was significantly, over $500,000 over our budget. And so then kind of went back, tried to reduce scope, look at options to kind of what we call value engineering, but looking for lower cost alternatives to bring it into budget. And unfortunately, construction costs increased in that time. So even after that effort was made, when we put it out to bid, costs came back even higher. So we looked at some additional funding sources, but at that time, it just was not feasible. And so we weren't directly involved at that time, but hearing from our predecessors, it sounds like the option of looking at roll-down side panels was brought up at that time. that there were some reasons it was looked at and maybe not explored further then, and reasons to look a little harder this time. So some of those reasons were people were a little concerned that sidewalls might limit the size of the vendor stalls, which we think that this solution doesn't. I think it's flexible enough. There were also some unknown costs then about the ability for the existing canopy to structurally support that, and that's something we've looked into further, so we think we have that information now and know, can inform this decision a little bit more. And then the other thing, there's a concern about impacting this nice open air feeling of the market, and so we've taken that into consideration as well. And so just the criteria and considerations we used in looking at the study were really providing access and ease of use for our market vendors. We know that a lot of people are using more than just what's under the canopy, and there's a desire to restock inventory from vehicles and surrounding areas, so making sure that's usable for vendors. We're also wanting to maintain the market's visibility, so visibility to surrounding pedestrians, accessibility from multiple points. We wanted to maintain the character of the market building, not influence that too much, maintain that open air feeling as much as possible. And then providing for flexibility of use as much as we can, looking to minimize construction impacts to market operations, avoiding impacting the existing parking, and again, costs always a very important option to consider. So this feasibility study process, we included a structural analysis. So we had structural engineers go out. We actually excavated down by some of the footings to really see what's there, what is this existing system. And a lot of calculations were run to see what it could support and what improvements would be needed to support the walls or side panels. And the study also looked into building code and energy code implications, because when you go from an open air canopy to even temporarily enclosing the space, there are code implications that influence what we can do and have some limitations. And then we also looked at additional considerations, so things like infrared heating, maybe permanently installing something like that. So that's something we explored as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Keith. Again, Keith is someone that the Parks Department has hired on behalf of us, and he might look familiar because he was also involved in the new building market project that was developed a few years before. But I'll let Keith kind of talk a little bit more about the specifics of the design option that came out of the recommendation.
Yeah, good evening. So this first slide that's up is kind of like an aerial view looking down at the market footprint. And really, the design area that we were looking at was along Detroit Street. You'll see design option 1 with an arrow. And we're just sort of highlighting the roof area in like a yellow that sort of identifies the area that would receive the sidewalls. And that kind of limited our study so that we could put some cost to it, so that we could evaluate it structurally, so that we could look at it from a building code standpoint. It's not to say that that couldn't be done throughout the market, but that was just kind of where our study was. And so if we go to the next slide, this is sort of the existing structure. You'll see that there's a rigid frame that occurs about every 16 feet, and that rigid frame varies slightly because of the grade change that occurs on the site, so that there's some height differences that happen along from one end of Detroit Street to the other end of Detroit Street. But these were kind of the existing conditions that we were looking at. And as Hillary mentioned, we were looking at the existing structure. We brought our structural engineer out. We sized the existing steel. We excavated down into footings and evaluated the different sort of loading that this existing structure could withstand and take once we put the sidewalls on. So then we started to look out, kind of like in the adjacent areas and see what's being done. Like what similar sort of vinyl sidewalls, roll-up panels could we use? Could they be rolled up on a pulley system? Could they be zipped down, Velcroed, that sort of thing. Again, this is a site plan that sort of looks at that area to establish a footprint that we could set some costs and also understand, like, from a building code standpoint, where our exiting might occur, We have limitations that we have to provide so many exits for certain distances, so how egress would be impacted, and just kind of the general functioning of the flow and circulation of the public, how the vendors would use the space where they would set their product up. And then this was a sketch that starts to identify the structure that would be existing and then what we would do to modify it. And we had about 3 different scenarios of ways of making the existing rigid frame kind of meet the building code requirements. And this was sort of the last variation, which we felt was really non-invasive, where we're attaching some diagonals. Up at the top frame, you can kind of see there with the marker of the mouse. And so we would do that with each frame to stiffen it up, rigidize it. We found that the foundations were adequate, but the frame was undersized to withstand the wind loads that would be as a result of putting the sidewalls up. And this is just more of a visual of showing what that frame would look like with the structural improvements. So you can see the diagonals. We felt that that was really non-invasive, so that, you know, it would appear as if it was always there. We're taking basically a T-shaped steel member and welding it onto the interior side of the existing steel columns, and then we're welding on 2 additional angles on either side of that steel column. And that was enough to meet our necessary required loads. And then this is just sort of a visual that starts to identify what that footprint could look like if we had these roll-up vinyl panels, kind of giving you an idea of what it looks like in the closed position. The slide before was kind of in the open position. The intent is to only have this down during market days so that it could be rolled up during days that there aren't any market happening, so that it would almost seem as if that it's not even there. So it'd be really user-friendly. Each vendor could operate their own, sort of their own vinyl roll-up curtain when they needed to get in and out. And there's also, in between each 16-foot wide panel, we're looking at like a removable Velcro panel that would be about 2 to 3 feet wide, that they could slide in and out of if needed. The shot on the top is, again, kind of like that exterior, and then the image on the bottom is what that might look like on the interior. You can see that public walkway would still allow the public to walk as they do today. The vendors being in the areas where they are today as well, but you know, putting the vinyl sidewalls down so that it can provide that comfort during the winter months. Another view kind of showing the open and close position, so that you could see that the vendor can open and close as needed and move product in and out, and what it might look like when it's in the open position, what it might look like when it's in the closed. Whether these are clear vinyl sidewalls, whether they're solid, you know, there's different variations that you can go with these curtains. Just another exterior image, and another exterior image.
Yeah, and then another component we looked at this was, you know, including heating with this. You know, obviously the sidewalls would prevent, you know, some wind, and also, you know, hold any heat kind of inside of it. We know that, you know, people right now are using heat out there, so we thought about using an infrared radiant heat kind of mounted on the ceiling. And in looking into that process, there are some constraints with the building code. So, so the building code basically says if we put radiant heating in, it would kind of cascade all of these requirements where we would, need to kind of make this a real full building. And so in order to keep it this kind of temporary situation, we can't actually plug into the grid at all. So if we wanted to use sidewalls and the heating would have to be powered off the grid, so like with solar panels. We do have solar panels out on some of the existing market right now. Unfortunately, they're older, they're not enough to support what we think we would need for the heating. So it's something we're exploring further, but it has a significant cost because it would be not just the cost of the heaters, but it would be replacing the existing solar panels and expanding that infrastructure. So it's a consideration. We were hoping it would be easier to look at both of them, but right now, that's something that's become a little bit more complex and that we're still exploring. And so I guess just kind of looking back at, some of the ways this, compares to to the previously proposed market building. The previous building accommodated 34 stalls with, kind of the, I guess, enclosed aspect where they would have fully enclosed sides. So with our current layout on, mostly Detroit Street and kind of connecting to the market office building, we'd be accommodating 49 stalls. So there's actually more that would be accommodated than that building. And there's also, like Keith mentioned, there's room to expand, whether there's a kind of an initial phase and additional phases done in the future, whether we kind of look at what makes the most sense, for the location of those. But there's a lot more flexibility with this to, affect a lot more vendors than just those 34 in the original building. Another difference is the original building did impact parking, so it removed 12 parking spaces. This does not affect the site at all. We don't need to go through the site plan review process. We don't affect parking. So those are some benefits, both from a timeliness standpoint, additional costs, and everything that we think is a really good aspect of this project. And then some of the things that the new building had that aren't accommodated in the sidewalls. The new building did add to the total number of stalls. There was a net gain of 16. And it also helped to improve some of that customer flow by extending the center aisle. So those are some things that aren't necessarily improved by this option.
I also want to jump in here really
Yeah.
quick and add, Hillary, I think the roll-down panels have a minimum impact on construction with not, we're able to do them without really disturbing a market day. And I think that after going through the construction last year, we've seen how important it is to kind of maintain easy access and everything. So that's an added advantage.
Yeah, we think this is something that could be done on off-market days, so minimal impact. And then, again, from costs, when we were looking at the $1.4 to $1.5 million with the building, construction costs have only continued to rise since then. I'm sure if we put that building out today, it would be higher than those numbers. With just the side panels, not looking at heating, we think that this might be in the $300,000 range. Again, these are really high-level costs, and if this is something we want to pursue further, as we look into details and develop it further, we'll refine those costs. So we think that this is something we have the budget for. This is something that could be done. We're confident with that. And so kind of next steps, we'd love to hear your initial thoughts and reactions. This is kind of just beginning this process of rolling this out and kind of taking everyone's temperature, getting your initial thoughts on it. And so we'll kind of review and incorporate the feedback we hear from you today. We intend to meet with the market vendor stakeholder group separately, hopefully in a few weeks. And then we'd develop a community engagement strategy from then, doing public meetings and informational outreach. And we'd also be looking to refine cost estimates and funding availability, and then developing the design further, ultimately getting construction documents that you could put out to bid, if this is something we want to move forward with. So yeah, thank you, and would love to hear any thoughts or questions you might have.
Are the ends gonna come off in the summertime? Can you pull up the end view of the well, you got one right there.
Yeah.
The ends,
Oh, you mean like these end panels?
Yeah.
Continue to speak into the
Oh, yeah.
microphones, please, thank you.
will those be removed in the summertime?
Yeah, so basically all of the panels, and you can speak to this too, Keith, would be able to be moved up and down as
Even the
needed.
ends?
Yep, even
Okay.
the ends. So,
Good
so those
deal.
are shown in the down condition. But yeah, in the summer, it would look very similar to what it does now.
I think I like the idea. I've
Yeah, great.
always thought that that should be done. One other question, the only other concern I would have, just from being down there and knowing what goes on down there, is there a ability to lock those up? Like when we leave the market, we roll them up, and then is there a way to lock them?
Sure.
Because you got kids coming through there and, pulling stuff down and whatnot.
Yeah.
That would be my only concern. But
Yeah,
aside
Keith,
from that,
I don't know if you ever
Yeah,
want to
we
speak to that. Yeah.
really haven't gotten that type, sort of level of detail, like,
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at fastening systems, is one, we're looking at, we're looking at, options of how this could, function. So that's kind of like the next
Okay.
step. But right now, we're looking at that, that vinyl sidewall would be contained in like a channel header, that would go from one rigid frame to the other. So you could maybe put a bottom piece up that could kind of like hinge
Okay.
and could close that bottom up, to
Yeah.
keep that sidewall from
Something
rolling
could
down. So
probably
we
be
could
done.
fabricate something that could be part of the design. Yeah.
I think the nice thing too is it would be high enough and invisible enough that I don't think it would invite a lot of vandal,
True.
a lot of unwanted activity too.
I know we're not anywhere near like the final stages of it, but I think that the clear is definitely a very good idea.
I have a question,
Yeah.
which was if the heating isn't an option, is there going to be issues with vendors bringing their own heat sources? Currently, a lot of vendors use like propane heaters or electric heaters, and since it's going to be a kind of enclosed area, would that cause any like fire risk?
Yeah, so I just briefly spoke with the building department about that, because Stephanie raised that concern as well. Unfortunately, I think the feedback we received from the building department would be when it's in the enclosed position, there wouldn't be heating allowed, a separate unit. Again, we'll continue looking into this radiant heating supported by solar to see how feasible that is. But I think right now, technically, that's what the building department is saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's a question I would love to hear feedback from the group is, if with the budget, we are only able to, we're not saying, we don't know yet, we might have the budget to be able to do both, but if we don't, the priorities, sort of heating versus the roll-down sides, and, if we have a situation where we do the roll-down sides, but we don't have that supplemental heat, is that okay, or is it something that, we really need both?
I think that it would make way more sense to do the roll-down sides first. And I would say that, yes, that would be, it would still be beneficial. There's gonna be a lot of Saturdays, last Saturday, for instance, it was sunny. If it's sunny, then you won't even need any heat in there, trust me. It's gonna be, plenty warm in there. And then if we did have, let's say we had a 3-degree weather day, and we didn't have heat in there, but we had those roll-down sides, then, if you really needed heat, you could still have the opportunity to leave it open and have your heater on. That would, I could have my roll-up side up and still have my heater on, and it wouldn't be any different than it is now.
Yeah.
Or if like electric heaters or heat lamps are still allowed, but not like open fire, like propane heaters. I don't know if there's a distinction there between what's allowed.
Yeah, I don't know offhand, but that can be something we can talk to the building department about if there's specific things that might be allowed. Yeah.
Where were the comparative spaces that you looked at the vinyl paneling for, like the Detroit filling station? They have vinyl paneling too, right? The vinyl curtains?
Yeah, that was one that was conveniently located for us to look at,
Right.
yeah.
So I'm actually wondering if we can get them to put a thermometer in there so we would actually know in that space that's enclosed, if they're not running heaters in there, if we could get an idea of how much heat would be
Yeah.
stored in that place.
It's on the wrong side, though. The sun
I think it is
Yeah.
heated too.
Yeah.
Is it,
Yeah.
is it heated?
I would imagine it's always, there's probably never a time when the heat's not running, at least at a low level, when it's real cold out.
But if there might be other spaces,
yes.
just to give the
Yeah,
vendors
sure.
an idea of,
Right.
you know, it's 20 degrees outside, but inside it's still
Yeah.
40.
Yeah.
There must be, I would think there would be specs like that available for vinyl curtains for us to get a sense of what the impact is on the internal temperature compared to what it is outside. I think that's a great suggestion if there's some research that could be done on that.
Yeah, we can look into it, definitely.
I will say, we did get a few comments emailed in. Most of them were really positive. Alex, who was on the commission before, you know, said she really liked the design and was supportive of it. One vendor did wonder, you know, the footprint that we chose would cover the current winter vendor use in like January through March, but it doesn't cover the vendor use in November and December, when I think these would still be preferred and really great to use. Actually, these could be used any time of year with rain or wind or lots of things, but especially when it gets colder and there's snow. And so, you know, she was wondering if it might affect customer traffic as well and make them less likely to go visit the other vendors that weren't on the main aisle. If we did install this, yeah, so
Yeah.
I said I would relay that point, which is a good point, but I, you know, think we also need to take into consideration, like, the fact that this can be expanded over time as we get more budget and that kind of thing.
I think the other side of that too, though, is that a lot of people may come in the winter, which wouldn't normally come, because if it's just too cold, then nobody comes, and versus, so that also you might get just a lot larger customer base, which would be a good plus too.
Right.
I would say that the budget, what was the budget that we had for the building?
Oh,
800? and-
875,
Okay, and this
yeah.
project was gonna cost what, just for the walls, 3
Just the
something?
walls, we're thinking around 300.
Okay. I mean, there's still money left on the table. This could be like a trial deal where within 1 year, we'd know, hey, this is pretty slick. And then go ahead and finish up doing the rest of the market. So I think it'd be just like a trial
Could be.
with the intention to expand it as long as everything goes smoothly.
I can share too, I think, these were absolutely not final cost estimates, but with the heating, it looked like installing the radiant heating for that space would be around 80 to 100,000, and installing the solar that we would need to be able to power it was around 175,000. So an additional 275,000 or so. Again, those are estimates.
But the city has grants for installing solar and things like that, right?
There are grants to install solar, but we don't know enough about them to be able to say we would definitely be able to get one. That is something we want to look into, though.
And I'm assuming parks can help with that, thinking about the grants and things
Yes,
like that. I'm
yeah, they can help us.
Thinking I mean, the city wants to go carbon neutral by
Yeah.
2030.
That'd
This
be-
seems like a real no-brainer in terms of needing solar panels
Yeah.
for the farmer's market.
I think also looking at timeline, the panels were something we could do relatively quickly, whereas the solar and the heating was something that would probably take longer because you are then applying for grants and that kind of thing.
But do they necessarily need to happen at the same time, or is there?
They don't need to happen at the same time unless we feel like they should for some reason, you know.
And the section that we're talking about actually doesn't have the solar panels now anyways, right?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, we're looking at the Detroit Street to kind of the farmer's market office. Another thing I just kind of was thinking of when you were mentioning vendors maybe being concerned that when it's all operational in November and December, some would have the side panels and some wouldn't. That might be an operational thing too, that maybe at that time you just say everyone leaves them up so that it is, you know, an egalitarian experience and no one has that benefit, and then maybe you wait until afterwards. Again, just an operational thing that could be considered too, so.
Is there a current total budget available? I mean, I hear that the current estimate at a high level is 300,000. Is there what's the number in terms of how much is available for this project?
Yeah, we're thinking it might be around 600, maybe a little bit more. That's something that the parks manager is kind of looking into right now.
Okay.
Again, it's always nice to have some breathing room there if construction costs come back higher than expected. So we're trying to be conservative. You know, if this is something it sounds like we want to keep continuing to look into, going through and developing the design further, putting together construction documents, closer to maybe halfway through that process, we would get a better sense of cost once we have details nailed down. So that'd be another good point to kind of look at what we're doing. Another option is when we go out to bid, we could always bid a lot of options, so what we call alternates. And sometimes you might bid, you know, your base bid is a certain area, then, you know, you have additional options to expand it further or add additional components. And that's something when the costs come back, you can kind of pick and choose what might fit your budget. So there's a lot of ways we can kind of look to make it fit, but this was kind of the result of this study right now.
I have two last questions, and they might be beyond the scope of detail here, but one thing is that if lots of people are using them, they need to be really durable, which I don't know about the durability of those kinds of materials, which you guys probably do. And then also I was thinking about like the tie downs, and I can really imagine somebody putting it down and being like, I don't feel like going and clicking it in. So like having things get damaged in that way would be a risk too. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, Keith, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they, so.
Here's the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of the thoughts was the way that a lot of these sort of restaurants, their sidewalls work is they have like a weighted rod that is an entire length that's kind of sewn inside the I guess the sidewall. And so it does help it for moving back and forth a bit. But, you know, obviously if you can cinch it down, when the wind catches it, it's not going to move it completely out. So that's something that we are looking at, is what those fastening options could look like.
Okay.
Working with different vendors would be the next step. And as far as durability, you know, these things are vinyl, and, you know, just the nature of the material over time, they may need to be replaced. The big cost is really in the structural improvements to the frame, getting the header in place. But we could see these things being changed over time for maintenance purposes. Yeah.
Stephanie, there's a new policy with the gutters that I remember you mentioning, that if somebody damages them, then they have to pay for the replacement. Could something also be put in, if the vinyl curtains work, that could also be sort of a expense for vendors if they damage the curtains?
I think it's definitely a possibility. I think we ended up putting the gutter in place because they were getting damaged from lack of attention and carelessness of just accidentally driving into them. So if the reason that the panels are getting damaged is the same reason, then I think it would make sense. But I think maybe we would have to see if they're getting and why, you know.
Let's hope nobody's driving into them. I don't know if this is a question for you, Hillary and Keith, or Stephanie, or maybe Jeff, or others who've had a longer-term involvement with this, but I was just sort of, as I was watching the presentation and thinking, that comparison that you did to the original building plan was really helpful. And I was trying to think about what I understood to be the original goal or goals of the building. And I know certainly handling or managing inclement weather and providing a more comfortable environment for vendors and shoppers is part of that goal. But I thought I understood that there were other goals as well, you know, in terms of providing a more permanent structure maybe, or increasing vendor space and influencing customer traffic. And so I just wondered if the initial goal, even why the initial building came to be, like sort of what was the intent and what were the goals of that building? And are we sure that we're addressing those goals, or at least deciding that we're setting aside those initial goals and focusing on inclement weather in this case, that you know, we're taking that forward as our main priority here?
I think it's a really good point, and I think we did, those goals we mentioned were increasing the permanent stalls, helping improve customer flow down that middle aisle, which there's a real problem with. And then, making it more equitable for those vendors who are in the middle aisle, that they have electricity, that they have coverage, that they don't have right now because they use the pop-up tents when they're really in the middle. So, yes, I think that those are things we lose that building answered. We put this proposal together, and I think we said, this we feel is the most important thing to answer, and that's what it does. But this, I think, is a time for this group to discuss that and say, like, are we okay giving up some of those advantages?
Yeah, thank you, that's helpful. And I would be concerned about obviously, we know the customer flow and the increase in number of stalls is not addressed. And the equitable impact on vendors is also one that seems to me that is not only not addressed, but is sort of negatively addressed with this option. And so and maybe that's wrong, maybe I'm not interpreting the plan correctly, but so I would just be interested in how the vendors are feeling about this broadly.
And I would say, sorry, one further note before anyone jumps in. I did view this new plan as actually a little more equitable because it offered that further protection to more vendors than
Okay.
it would have with the building. So this building, we didn't have as much room for as many vendors, and the ones that would use it in the winter, the plan was they could only have 2 stalls instead of the 3 that they take right now, so everyone would have to kind of downsize. But I think that the other point is that, yes, we are losing that, but right now, we don't really have a way forward with doing the building, and those problems aren't getting addressed anyways.
And I think also, kind of what we mentioned before is that, again, maybe this is a phase 1, or maybe we look at changing where this would be implemented. But with the building, I don't think there was really an option to affect all the vendors, and I think this does have an ability to be extended throughout the market. So there is, an opportunity to be more equal with everyone with this approach, yeah.
Yeah, if I recall, the building footprint was roughly 40 or 50 by 80, so roughly 4,000 square feet. And I think the area that you're looking at just in the yellow is just over 6,000. So you're 2,000 square feet more for more than half, Obviously, I think the building was doing some other things, picking up additional space that was on site and capturing that and trying to resolve some circulation issues with the vehicles. But there's sort of a trade-off, when you're looking at that.
Thank you.
Stephanie, how much of a need is there for more stalls now? Because I know since that plan went into place, that the market's gone through some changes too.
You mean more year-round stalls?
Or just, if the building was going to add,
Oh,
12 more stalls.
Yeah.
Do you think that's still a top priority need for the market, is adding more stalls? I just remember in the last couple of years that middle aisle, the sand lot, you've been using it more for activity space and for providing places for people to eat. I haven't seen it quite be as full during the summer months with the vendors in that
Yeah.
area.
That's a really good question. I think right now, we do use it in the height of the summer for vendor stalls. And the market fluctuates so much in how many vendors we have that this year, we might not use it as much, and then in a couple of years, we might use it and more. So I think that there's always a need for more stall space at the market. Yeah.
I actually liked this summer, like when the glass blowers were there and in the fall, I really actually liked you being able to have the flexibility of that open space to put in activities there that could handle a crowd that was sort of out of the way for the people who wanted to go shopping.
Yeah. And I think we try to address the flow as well, from just, customers stopping when they get to the end of the middle aisle or not going down it because it's short, by putting our events in the middle or putting very attractive, like, ready-to-eat food lunch in the middle, to kind of keep that. So we're able to address it a little bit, not as well as we would if it was seamless. But it's definitely something that we can tweak.
I'm also assuming if the solar panels went in, that would also help with some of the electrical hiccups that happen at the market every once in a while.
I
Hopefully.
think by electrical hiccups, we mean the outlets short out often. Yeah, we're actually getting all those replaced this winter, so they should not do that anymore. Yeah.
And on the existing structure, are there any stalls without electricity, or was it just people out in the sand lot?
Just those in the sandlot.
Okay, okay. And how's the Wi-Fi?
We don't have it, but that would be really nice to have. Yeah. Okay.
I have one more question, sorry. I just would be interested to know how the stalls that would be made available, like protected by weather, compares to the number of vendors in the winter that attend on a good
Yeah,
day.
it's a good question.
And so like to see if this would actually cover the regularly winter attending vendors.
Yes. I had those numbers at a previous meeting, and I
Okay.
can't remember offhand what they were now, but, this covers 49 stalls, I think we said. Our average winter customers, or vendors, we have 17 of them. And, if you come in the winter, you'll see what's taken up. I'd say there are probably along that main aisle, what would be covered, and open at least 10 to 20 stalls right now. Did you say, Jeff? Because you're there
Yeah.
every week.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10 to 20 that are open right now. I have had vendors told me that they would come in the winter that aren't coming right now.
Right.
So a lot of those would be used and taken. You would just see a fuller market. So I don't know how many would come if we did have that, but
So I guess that's why I was wondering, like, not the average of all the winter markets, but on a good day, because that's different.
Yeah,
Like a
right.
40-degree day is
Right.
totally different than a 20-degree day. Is it?
Usually, I would say the market fills up to about here
On a good day?
on
so.
a good day. I'd say
Okay.
there's still empty stalls on a
So-
good day even.
Yeah, sorry, so, because we can't see the map.
Oh, yeah.
On a good day, I would say it still has that leg that's closer to Carytown. Maybe a fourth of it is taken, and the rest
Okay.
is open.
Okay.
And also the little leg that connects the office to the main aisle, that's not taken on a good day.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it overall seems like a really good idea. I know it's something that, in the budget, that comes about in a really good place, and based on the history of this stuff, it will probably be more, as it normally is, so it seems like it's actually doable, and that's been what I've heard over and over, too. It's just, there's the demand, the need has been there for a long time, and this is an effort that actually could achieve something, and that seems like a good idea. So thanks for all that you've done with it, too.
Yeah, thanks.
It looks nice, too.
It does look
Yeah.
nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Do you want to just recap next steps then?
Yeah, sure.
First?
So,
Okay.
so again, we'd be looking to meet with the market vendor stakeholder. Be looking to meet with the market vendor stakeholder group next to kind of get their feedback, and then looking at broader public meetings after that, and then again, kind of in the interim, continuing to like refine the design, look at cost estimates and funding a little bit more closely. as we continue to get buy-in, so.
Yeah, and I think our homework too is to figure out a little bit more on the electrical or the heating requirements and what that would look like.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Thank
When
you
you
all.
get to the community engagement part, I mean, the three of us could also help push that out.
Great, thank you.
Excellent.
Good.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, well,
Thank
thank you to Keith and Hillary so much for all your hard work on this. This has been, yeah, it's great.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on to regular business. We have a new vendor request.
Okay, yes. So this is a request from Core Life Eatery, and he's here today. So you'll actually have a chance at the end of, end of the meeting if you want to make any comments we have public comments. But I did, I'm super glad you're able to make it. And this was a vendor who's interested in coming to our market and bringing it to PMAC because it's not really traditional. It hasn't something that we have seen before. So I'd love to get your feedback on it. And I did mention in the email some of the details, but basically Core Life Eatery, sorry, I'm just going to kind of read from your letter to represent you as well as I can, they make everything from scratch at their restaurant. They're a restaurant in Ann Arbor. They use whole food ingredients that are free of GMOs and additives. It's very fresh, salads, grain bowls, rice bowls. Very good for vegan-friendly, vegetarian, gluten-free, paleo, lots. So it meets, I think, a lot of the requests of a lot of our customers that like that type of food. And so they make meals. They use Michigan ingredients. They use La Grasso to source their food using Michigan producers. So Core Life is a Michigan-owned franchise based in Kalamazoo. Joyce Lunsford has been an active, I'm just reading from this, Joyce Lunsford has been an active member in Michigan restaurant community for many years. The Core Life brings great scratch-made food to local communities throughout the state. They're a Michigan-based company operating a national brand. So he came to me because he wanted to bring some of their prepared meals, salads, bowls to serve, as customers for takeaway, but also just to be able to eat right there, which is something I think there is a demand for at the market. But I think where the question gets into is it is a restaurant. It's a national brand restaurant. It is owned by it is Michigan owned. They're in Kalamazoo. They do make everything from scratch in their kitchen. But again, it's a national brand, a national chain. So I think what we really need to consider is, what are the implications if we do or don't decide that this really fits with the market's mission to have as a vendor? And fortunately, I think there are plenty of ways to participate at the market. Even if he's not able to be a vendor, we have our cooking demos and that kind of thing. So we definitely want to engage with him. But just as being a regular vendor, that is the question. Yeah.
I'm wondering if the distinction between a food truck and a vendor, because in some ways this sounds more close to a lot of the food truck offerings in that way, because it's like some of the prepared food stuff that is there, it's often used with ingredients from the market itself. And DeGrasso does, as sourcing from there, they do have, I looked through their website beforehand, and they have, I think, 4 local farmers among, you can also get pineapple and bananas and everything else from there too. And none of those farmers are ones that are at our market. So it doesn't necessarily reflect the product that comes from our market. Whereas if the food trucks, that's fine. If you're making whatever, it doesn't often necessarily have that same requirement. It seems a little bit more transient versus people who are really in there as prepared food vendors. I think we've been historically pretty strict with making sure that there's at least some connection to this market in particular, to the product that's made by, so for example, salads. If they were salads which were made by, or the greens were from one of the local for growers, fantastic, and that would seem like a slam dunk. That'd be a really easy one. But if it's not, it's some other person that's, I don't know, it feels less in the mission in that way for, within, at least in the producer side for, again, for market, for mobile, for, it seems possible. But that's just how I perceive it.
Yeah, okay.
What are the requirements for a food truck? I think that's a really good question. And
yeah.
I had sort of been envisioning this as a food truck. And so I'm curious
Right.
what the recommendations are.
I mean, they have the same requirements as our vendors in that it has to be producer only, so they have to make everything from scratch. That, yeah,
But
You
does that-
physically have to have a truck.
that's it. No, so not all of our mobile
Pilar.
food vendors have trucks. Ginger Deli and Pilar's, for example, Pilar's is a restaurant. So similar to Core Life, a restaurant that comes, does a pop-up and sells the food that they make in their restaurant at the market. I think the difference is that Pilar's, the owner is here in Ann Arbor, and she started the business, and yeah.
So was there any hesitation because Pilar's used to be at the market regularly and they're not as much now? Was there any hesitation when they came in as a vendor? Or was it's like, even if they had a storefront, they could be a vendor at the market, but they were an Ann Arbor-based company? Is that?
Right. I think we have a number of vendors come that have restaurants. Mi Compadre, they have their truck, they bring it, they have a restaurant. Pilar's, Ginger Deli did at one point, he doesn't anymore. But I think the thing we look at and I wonder about is when it comes to the vendor and ownership of the business. I mean, I think of like Bush's, for example. I don't think we would, I mean, that might be another question, but if Bush's wanted to apply and come and sell at the farmer's market, I think that my initial response would be no. Or Whole Foods. Yeah.
So I might have missed something here. So basically, what exactly is he selling at the market? Is it going to be prepared food that's ready to eat right there on the spot?
Can you, yes. Do you want to answer that question? Yeah, you can answer that. We can ask you questions and you can respond if we have questions, so.
Yes, we would be making all of our food that morning, bringing it all prepared foods, pre-portioned out salads, rice bowls, and we'll have all the equipment to chill or heat those dishes there. We will not be selling anything individually ingredients, no. So I'm not going to bring, because I did look at your vendor list, and I don't know if they're gonna be here this year, but you had people who sell bone broth. Well, we sell bone broth. I don't wanna compete with current vendors. We do roast our own bones in-house. We do make our own bone broths in-house. However, I will not be bringing just bone broth to sell because I wanted to, be aware of that.
Thanks.
Yep.
Okay.
So why wouldn't we treat this as a food truck?
I think that it's the same. All of our food trucks are like, we're working directly with the owner of the food truck. They're not like franchises. Yeah, it's the difference between a franchise and an individual business.
And the food trucks are once a month during certain months, not every
Well,
weekend.
Not necessarily,
No,
right?
some that are,
Yeah,
No, we
some
have
are every.
they're food truck
some
rallies.
as part of the market.
Yeah.
Ah.
Mhm.
So basically what he would be doing, I'm not sure what her name is, the lady that sells is it lasagna she sells or?
Harvest Kitchen, is that what you're talking about? Oh.
No, this is like food, she cuts it off with a spatula and puts it on a plate and sells it to you.
The Mediterranean food?
I've never eaten
Okay.
it. I don't know, I just see her over there and she's
Okay.
got an
Yes, that's
apron
what-
on.
Yes, Yeah, I think it's
That's who
her,
it is.
Furiel.
Yeah, yeah. So how's this any different than what she's doing?
Again, she's not a franchise.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I think another thing that needs to be looked at, and if it goes any further, is the amount of that kind of thing that we allow on the market. Again, it's a farmer's market, so you got, the majority of the vendors need to be farmers, or should be. And then you have so many slots for artisans, and then you have, so many slots for food.
Right.
So I think that's something that needs to be looked at as well.
Although prepared food was on the
Yeah.
customer desired list,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yes, it was.
So really, the main concern is just because they're a franchise?
Yeah.
Not, yeah,
Yeah.
right, and, I mean, I guess this is not fully formed,
Okay, okay.
but, like, if it's the size of the franchise that matters, right? I guess maybe that's something too. I don't know. My initial response to it is sort of like, that's weird, I don't know, because we're like individual people doing things at the market, right? But then I don't know why, so I guess I need to think about it more. That's my response.
Okay.
And
Fair enough.
yes, I hear that. And so I was thinking it through too. And a franchise is essentially a individual or a small business, right? It just has this national brand.
Right.
But, and even the national brand is Michigan-based, so any way you slice it, we're support, the money's.
I do not want to misrepresent
Okay.
myself
Great,
at
yes,
all.
please.
We are based out of Syracuse.
Oh, okay,
The national brand is.
I see.
Our owner is Michigan. I don't
In
want to
Kalamazoo.
misrepresent.
Oh, I appreciate that. No, I thought from the description that this was that the national chain was based in Kalamazoo.
The national brand is based in Syracuse.
Okay, and the franchise owner is based in Kalamazoo. Got it. So, yeah, so that's
That's a little
different than what I understood.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this would be equivalent to like if Harvest Kitchen wanted to come sell at the market too, because it's a local franchise.
But it's not.
Kitchen already does.
It's,
Who are you talking about?
Harvest Kitchen,
They
the,
do sell it.
or sorry, I mean,
oh.
I'm sorry, the Great Harvest, the
Yes.
bakery, I'm
Right.
sorry.
Yeah.
yeah, I think it would be similar to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that this is the kind of product that I think is really attractive and would probably encourage people to come to the market. I think the Ann Arbor demographic is really interested in this kind of food, and so it seems to me like if we could find a way to be comfortable with it, it would be a real benefit to have at the market. So I think if the question is the national orientation of the franchise, then I don't know, we need to think about, are there guidelines or something that we can put into place?
Yeah, I don't think there are current guidelines, so maybe we have to create them. And I think, like I said, I just want to make sure if we create guidelines, that we have to be able to apply them to everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if we
Right.
get another request from Great Harvest or
Yeah.
something.
Or Bush's,
If
to your
Bush's
example,
or
right.
Whole Foods,
Right.
then we have
Chipotle.
to be able to give them the same answer.
Chipotle,
But again, they're making, not all of them are the same. They're making everything in-house in their kitchen from scratch,
Using local ingredients, which is huge.
using Michigan
Well,
ingredients,
well-
right?
Is that with the mic every time?
La
Yeah.
Grasso's is
Sorry.
only local part of the year.
Right,
La Grasso, when they can source,
right,
they
Right.
do.
sure.
Then that's exactly what I put in the email.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to misrepresent exactly
it.
what I am. I'm not.
Do you
Yeah,
have
we
flexibility in
appreciate
sourcing?
No.
Okay.
No, unfortunately, I do have flexibility in sourcing non-produce ingredients. For instance, our coffee is the only thing, we don't ground our own coffee in-house. It's sourced from Grand Rapids. Where we have flexibility, we source from Michigan. Our walnuts, our almonds, Michigan sourcing. I don't have flexibility in sourcing my produce because we are a salad restaurant, and there becomes and I represent not only my franchise, but 61 stores nationwide. Something happens, God forbid, food issue or illness-wise, I am hurting the entire brand.
Yeah.
So-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
which is the kind of relationship with a franchise too, which is
Yeah.
something you need to abide by, but also
Sure.
then there's a difference, and it is a constraint that automatically comes from that.
I see where the franchise issue falls into place now
Yeah, me
because
too.
Yeah.
all of us down here, we're making our own decisions
Right.
as far as we are the owners of the company. So I see exactly where you're going with that.
Right, yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that that's something that needs to be looked at a little more, thought about or talked about, and
Okay, well, maybe for next meeting, I can come up with a couple different approaches, like proposals. You know, maybe this, like if, one that says, we think that this would be a good fit for the market as long as, you know, they make everything in-house, as long as they make these things, even though it is a franchise. And maybe also come up with a proposal that says, we don't think that any business model like this is just really a good fit for our market, and these are the reasons. And then we can kind of hash it out a little more. Does that sound good?
I
Sounds
have a
good.
question with the food trucks in terms of like seniority and things like that. Do they have that, does that whole infrastructure exist for that community or no?
They don't build seniority.
Okay, because that may be something else too, in terms of it's like kind of, it's like a priority queue, that there are certain
Right.
groups that are of higher or kind of more prioritized than others, and in that way, it does provide flexibility in that way.
Right.
So that might be something to consider as that categorization too.
Okay.
I think it would be a good idea. I agree with everything that you said about it being a good fit for the market. I think it would be a good idea maybe to look at, have, let's say, 4 to 6 spots when they're available on the market, when they're not all taken up. And it could be on like almost like a special event deal
Okay.
where they come in and they're allowed to sell food out of there, but they're not a vendor at the market, so to speak. Does that make sense?
I like that.
Yeah.
So it's not,
Which is like food trucks. kind of.
yeah, like the food trucks, exactly.
I know that, like, you mentioned you would be interested in coming most weeks in the summer, though, right?
Yes, if I am doing this kind of, my owner is like, go for it, fight for it, but I have no idea how this is gonna work, is what she mentioned to me. I wanna be a part of Ann Arbor. We're the only store within 2.5 hours from here. We're the only store that's gonna be open within the next 6 years, 45 minutes from here. I'm not going anywhere as a general manager, and so I understand that's kind of why. So that's why I wanted to get into the farmer's market, is to kind of become a part of the community. So whatever that takes, if it's not a normal vendor, fine. We had mentioned culinary things, great. I'm into it. I'm not gonna just go with my tail between my legs, you know, if it's not a vendor, and just be upset. I wanna become a part of the community as a restaurant.
Thanks.
Great.
Okay, well, I can come up with a couple different ways we could approach this, like, to make a policy around it, I think, is what we want to do. And in the meantime, you know, we can work with him to maybe schedule some of our more special events where he wouldn't be necessarily a vendor, but can still be involved. Okay,
Thank you.
sounds
Yeah, thank
good,
you.
thank you.
Okay, next up on regular business, transfer of seniority rules.
Okay, I just included these because we have 2 requests for seniority. We have, so, first of all, the rules. Both of these fall under Section C of our request for seniority. So seniority may be transferred upon the sale or transfer of a vendor business, if all of the following apply. So to be clear, this is one vendor, the owner, wanting to sell their business and their stalls to someone else. That other person would maintain their same seniority within the market and their same stalls. That's what a transfer means of seniority, basically. So that's pretty clear, but, so the new owner has to have a minimum of 51% management and control. The new owner of the vendor business is in the same vendor category and has similar products. They have to have actively participated with the original vendor at market for a minimum of 3 years and been listed on the application for 3 years. They must provide evidence of capacity to maintain the same attendance record. Also continuity of the business, so it's important that, facing the public as the same, using the same name, similar products, holding it out as the same business. They submit the application to the manager within 30 days of the sale. They may transfer up to 3 stalls, and they can't transfer again for another 5 years. So I've received these 2 applications. We need to look at both of them and then vote on whether to recommend that the transfer may take place. Then that will go to the Community Services Administrator, and they will make the final approval or disapproval, and we'll let them know. So the first one is Tina Koski. She is requesting to transfer her seniority and her stalls to Brandy Newberry, who has worked on her farm for several years and been listed on the application for several years. They meet all of the requirements that I just read, except the only thing that's a little different is it's in her name, the person's name, so the stalls in her business are as Tina Koski. But Brandy has said they're going to try and maintain the same vendor name, even though it's a different person representing it. They'll still hold the business out to the customers in the market as Koski or Tina Koski. So that's the situation there, unless. And then as further documentation, they've submitted a signed notarized agreement that Brandy will be taking 51% ownership and management of the business. So are there any questions with that application in regard to that? Okay. In that case, I just need a motion and, a motion.
I move to approve.
Second.
All right. Thank you.
Do we have to vote?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Okay, great. So the next one is for Green Things Cooperative. This is also a little unusual, but I think still kind of falls within the same framework. So this is a situation where Green Things Farm, Nate and Jill, want to form a collective with 2 other current vendors who are looking to give up their stalls and become part of this collective, and then all of them would be owners and be vendors under Green Things Farm, basically. So they would all together have the Green Things Farm stalls and seniority. The name is a little different. It's Green Things Farm, which they would keep, but they are calling themselves Green Things Collective. And there are actually 5 individuals looking to do this. So the way that I think they did it was Nate and Jill, Green Things, sold their business to the collective. So Nate and Jill are buying Green Things Farm, Green Things Farm from themselves with these 3 other vendors, if that makes sense. So Nate and Jill, of course, have been on the application for 3 years, as does one other person. There are just the 2 vendors who are giving up their stalls and wanting to join the collective that haven't been listed on the application or involved in the business for 3 years. But again, they're 2 of 5. So other than that, though, I think they meet the other requirements as listed out. Keeping a very similar name, similar products, same location and space, and they are adding products because they're joining businesses, but the products they're adding are still in line, I think, with what Nate and Jill had been doing. So that's the situation there. Does anyone have questions? thoughts?
I think this collective model is an important one for thinking about moving forward for farms. So this is sort of a separate issue because I clearly want to support this group, but do we need to do any little modifications of the rules to just think about this for the future? Not, we don't have to do it now.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can go through an approval, but something like this case is with 5 people, and as you said, there's just 2 new people coming in. So if it's the majority of owners have been with the business for 3 years.
Okay. Yeah, it is the majority. Mhm.
Yeah, yep, so just thinking about the rules
Right.
going forward, because I think this could be a really important business model for
Yeah,
young
that's a good
farmers
point.
moving forward.
Okay, good. Great. Anything else?
We need a motion to
We need
support.
all right, well, we need a motion then.
I move to approve.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Okay,
Okay, next up, we have hemp and CBD requirements, and there's an attachment related to this.
yes, yeah, thank you all, when I wasn't here, for hearing those requests. So I put this on the agenda, and I do want to be mindful of time. I think there might be another meeting in here at 7, so I think we should just get through what we can.
Okay.
I summarized basically what Christian's presentation had included, and then I looked at the MDARD guidelines and included those there. So I think my only question from that presentation was around food. Hey, do you guys have a 7 o'clock meeting?
Yes, we have a planning commission meeting at 7.
That's what I thought. We'll
We'll
make
make
sure
sure.
we're wrapped up by 7.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thanks. So the grass, generally regarded as safe, is a list of substances that the FDA considers safe to add to food. Whole hemp seeds, hemp seed protein, and hemp seed oil are considered grass as of 2018. CBD is currently not considered grass as of March. In Michigan, any food production falls under the Michigan food law and the licensing requirements under the law. So does that mean that CBD products are not, so CBD products aren't edible?
Mhm,
Right.
that's
Okay. So, okay, that was my only confusion. I just want to make sure. So after those presentations, were there any strong feelings about letting this on the market and how we might want to do that and what we might want to require?
I think there was agreement that we needed to follow the Michigan laws
Yes.
and that we understood that those were in flux
Mhm.
and that maybe we need to move slowly until the ground sort of leveled out on the regulations and the requirements.
Yeah, and there was also, I think, agreement that we would want to apply the same kinds of guidelines to anyone, bringing CBD as we would to other producers, so following the producer-only guidelines. And there were some products that we were pretty sure we'd want to take off the list of options, right out of the gate.
The smokable flour.
The smokable flour
Yeah.
is one example that stands out.
Yeah, okay. Does it make sense then? I mean, it sounded from watching the last meeting that, maybe we want to open it up to current vendors to be able to bring their items as long as they provided those 2 licenses that they need. Do that as sort of a pilot. We can open it up to outside vendors later if we choose to. And, ask for proof of those licenses and then allow the products that are allowed under the law except smokable flour. Is that sort of where we landed? Okay.
And the only question I see you have in here too is that seed and plant. as
Oh,
to
yeah.
whether those could be included, and that I don't think we really discussed that much. It's an interesting question, though.
Well, let's see what people request to bring.
Yep.
And then if we have any questions about it,
We'll
I
cross
can.
that bridge when we get.
Yeah, we can cross that bridge when we get there.
Do we have a sense of how many vendors this actually covers?
I've heard from at least 3
Okay.
that want to bring, maybe 4. So
Okay,
We'll
so a
see.
small number, so it's a reasonable pilot. It wouldn't be
think
like
so.
everyone all over.
TBD donuts.
Okay.
great, good. Moving on.
Okay, producer-only guideline recommendations.
Sorry to interrupt. Maybe we should skip ahead to officer ballots
Okay.
since we are
Okay, and
limited.
bring that back next meeting.
Yeah, or do this first and then see how much time we have left.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so in the packet, I guess I'd like everyone to just kind of rip that, we're gonna use the page in your packet to vote, because it has to be anonymous voting. So, time to elect new officers. I believe everyone is eligible to do any office. We are looking for a chair and a vice chair. And you've kind of seen the responsibilities of the chair are to, move us through the agenda, keep things on track, and if they want, meet with me and off market to kind of help put the agenda together. And then the vice chair would just take over responsibilities if the chair can't make it. So is there anyone who has interest in being either or?
I've been vice chair. I'm happy to continue.
You're happy?
And I have to bow out because I may have conflicts next year.
Okay, so not Lisa.
Sorry.
Okay, but no one wants the chair position.
I mean, I'm happy to continue, I'm certainly willing to continue as chair. And also, Peter, I mean, as you say, you've been vice chair, so maybe,
You guys are doing a great job. Keep it up.
maybe you want to consider.
I'd be, we could swap. Maybe.
wanna swap?
That'd be fine with me too.
Yeah, I'd be glad to try out the vice chair role and just see how
It's an awesome
see how it
responsibility.
fits. So if you feel
Sure,
like.
sure.
Okay.
All right.
Not saying anyone should vote any particular way.
Right, thanks, guys. Now everyone needs to anonymously vote and then pass their ballots to me so I can reveal who is the chair and vice chair. Okay, well. Okay, it looks like the chair is Peter Wolf, and our vice chair is Holly. Thank you very much. All right, well, thank you both for
Thank you.
volunteering. We really appreciate it. Okay, good job. Let's see, we have like 5 minutes.
Do we want to get to the customer or to public feedback? Because there are still some people here. who are-
Yeah, let's bring the other two, well, the transfers, we've been working on the guidelines for so long. I wonder if we can just pass a resolution that we like them to put them into practice.
I move to like them.
I second the motion to pass them, I think.
Okay, I'm going to word that better, but, okay, Peter moves, Holly seconds.
All- Sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we pass a resolution to support the proposed producer-only guidelines that we have been working through. With the changes, I included those all in your packet, the very small changes based on comments from last meeting. So we will now put these into a trial period to practice them and see how that goes. Thank you.
Great.
Great. Okay, let's do
Public.
public comment.
Okay. So if you're here for public comment, now's your time. I don't, do they come in a certain order?
Nope, they just have 3 minutes. If anyone would like to speak.
We'll need to move fairly quickly because I know we only have about 6 minutes left, so it's just about perfect. Are you here for public comment? Okay.
Just listening.
Great.
Okay.
I mean, my only public comment that hasn't already been said is, I really hope that Core Life can be a part of the farmer's market in some way. I do think we could be a great vendor. We do make everything in-house. I mean, we make our own buttermilk in-house. That's how really far down we go. It's pretty easy to buy buttermilk. We choose not to. It's not something that our owner will go away from. Our owner has left other restaurant chains that I will keep nameless because they switched away from. He is the owner or founder of the company. He's not changing away from it. We make everything gluten-free. Everything can be made vegan. And also, to continue that, my plan is when we do bring in prepared salads, I will be putting protein in a separate container inside the salad container. So if somebody wanted their salad to be made vegan, I take the protein out, I charge them accordingly. We will be making everything the right way. And if anybody has any questions, I'm literally there 6 days a week. And be happy to answer anything. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Yep.
you.
All right, and time?
Yeah, should we adjourn for the week?
I think so.
Okay, at 6:55, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
I didn't get a chance to go over